chunks because it's just a big chapter. Okay, so we're going to start with color. So we're on part 4 of chapter 4 out of 6. The color wheel is really important in color theory, and honestly, I could talk for an hour about color theory. But what we're really looking at is the color wheel, and we're talking mostly in this chapter about paint. It's going to tell you about additive color, and this has to do with light and somewhat to do with theater and digital things, computer, and so on. But for our purposes in this book, we're mostly focused on paintings, so I'm going to keep us to the basics of adding, or this is subtractive color, sorry, but mixing paint together, if that makes sense. So refracted colors observed by Sir Isaac Newton when light's directed through a prism. Color theory is quite new when you think about Isaac Newton, who is in 1666. Before that, we really didn't have color theory. There were always rainbows, and there's only one color on here that doesn't exist in the rainbow, and that's red-violet. So we were aware of the colors that we had. The other thing I want to say about that is there, in terms of fabric, really until the 1800s, when we had the Industrial Revolution, there weren't a ton of colors for fabrics that were reasonable to produce. They're very expensive. And when you talk about royal purple or royal blue, that was available by crushing some shells of a particular kind of a sea snail in the Mediterranean, and it was very expensive and very labor intensive, so only royal people could afford purple. So this whole color spectrum and the idea that all these pigments were always available isn't exactly correct. Pigments were available for paint, not for clothing, and they were expensive, and that's why you needed a sponsor like the Pope or so on, like Michelangelo and Da Vinci. At any rate, primary colors, it's back to basics here, are where we see a 1. Yellow is 1, red is 1, blue is 1. These are pure colors. They can't be broken down into any other colors. Secondary colors, you're going to see the 2s here. There's 3 secondary colors. There are 6 tertiary colors, which is a mixture of a secondary, which is a number 2, and a primary, which is number 1, that equals 3. You're going to make one of these, that's all I'm going to say about this, because you need to do the research. So color properties, the hue is the name of the color, and we had our names back on the previous color wheel, and it's in the book, page 90. The value of it is its lightness or darkness, meaning if we had added white or black to it for one instance, and our intensity is the purity of the color. Warm colors, I'm not going to say too much about this because it's your extra credit, figure this part out. So again, skip the additive color, but I just want to mention it here. Subtractive colors, what we're doing, these are pigments, okay? And I'll talk more about pigments when we get into painting, but different hues mixed together result in darker or duller colors. A color scheme is selective use of 2 or more colors in a single composition, and we do have some artists in this book that use color very deliberately and not just in a representational way. Monochromatic is variations of the same hue. I'm going to back up here for a second. Say I was going to do a painting and I wanted to do it monochromatically. Look at all these variations of blue. I could do that in just blue, and I could get a fair amount of range here, and there's even darker I could go. So that's monochromatic. Mono means 1, chromatic means color, 1 color. Complementary colors, those are hues directly opposite on the color wheel. Sorry, I went the wrong way. So our complementary colors, I always tell students to think of Lakers, Broncos, and Christmas. Whoops, I missed Broncos. Broncos is kind of here or here, and then Christmas. So those give you an idea. There are more than that, but that's the basic way to remember that. Complementary colors are opposite on the color scale. Okay. Analogous colors, those are close to each other on the color wheel. So we're talking about like orange, yellow, red. triadic, and those are equidistant. And those could be the primaries or the secondaries, for example, and that's a way to really punch up a composition. Okay, this is Mondrian, and he uses primary colors only. There's yellow, red, and blue. It's a little orangey yellow, but I don't think that's correct. I think it's a brighter yellow in reality. He is deliberately just using right angle black squares, and he is using primary colors. This is very deliberate, early 20th century, and he is coming up with a theory of his own